Hello everyone and welcome to our webcast today, Introduction to Navisworks 2018 in a BIM Workflow. We have Michelle Rasmussen with us today from ASCENT, so I'll pass things over now to her.
Thank you, Corinne. All right, so today we're actually going to be talking a bit about the newest book I've put out recently, which is the Autodesk Navisworks, using Navisworks in a BIM workflow. And so we'll specifically be talking about the construction project scheduling chapter, which is chapter 9. It's the last chapter. And before I get too in-depth into that chapter specifically, I thought I'd introduce to you a little bit about what that workflow actually looks like. And we spent a lot of time talking with clients and making sure that, that the workflow that we're recommending actually fits with the workflows that they are using to make sure that, this is really a cohesive workflow that works well across industries. Because this book actually takes into account civil models and Revit models and even an inventor model. So we're crossing industries with this book, and because we're really trying to help you understand how to consolidate those models to see how everything is going to end up working in the field and how it's all going to come together on the construction site. And so we start off with the very beginning, teaching you how to consolidate those models, appending the models together, making sure they line up together. And then we jump into, reviewing those models, making sure that everything fits together. And so we talk about, saving views, getting, moving around in the views, and even sectioning the model, because if you've got a building, you're going to easily see the outside of that building, but sometimes you need to dig deeper and actually see the mechanical workings, all the electrical and HVAC and everything that goes into that building. And so we do talk a little bit about sectioning there. And then we go into analyzing the model, actually measuring the model, making sure everything fits properly, looking at the properties of the model, and learning how to select the model in different ways so that we can easily show and communicate how everything works. And if it doesn't work, the next thing we do is we talk about actually marking up the model, doing some red lines so that you can send those red lines back to the original model designer or builder. Maybe it's your Revit model, you need to send that back to the architect. And you can let them know, hey, this wall is interfering with the pipes from the plumber, or this wall is interfering with, where we're going to be bringing in the water from, off-site, or where the sewer is going to connect, or, whatever the case might be, where the architect actually meets the civil engineer, and so that we can communicate that information. In addition, we actually go through and do clash detections and talk about file sharing so that you can share those clash detections with your counterparts, whether it be the civil engineer, the architect, or the mechanical engineer. And then finally, what we're going to be talking a little bit about today is the construction phase. And so we'll talk a bit about the project timeline today. We won't get too much into simulation other than simulating some of the construction. But there's a lot more simulation that can be done. In fact, we actually show you in Chapter 8 how to simulate the or animate the construction equipment on site. And so you'll actually see in my model, I have a crane in my model when I open it up, and we teach you how to animate that crane to show how things work when they're putting the air conditioning unit on top of the building. So lots of fun stuff in this. We've tried to still keep it fundamental so that someone new to the software can still learn using this student guide, but also making it advanced enough that you can learn the basic commands and then move that outside of the box more than what we taught you in this student guide to really take you to that next level of your project. So let's talk a little bit about Timeliner. Timeliner is where you're going to actually create those connections between your model and the construction schedule. And so there's two ways that you can actually do that. You can create the schedule from scratch, just by basically, adding each line item in, and I'm going to show you how to do that today. Or you can import a project management task list. So maybe you've got Primavera or MS Project, something like that. You can bring that information in from your external database and then connect it to your parts. And I'm going to show you how to do that today as well. So when we're talking about the let's go back one slide. So here in Timeliner, you notice that there are multiple columns on the left-hand side. This is the task list pane, and this is where the heart of the information resides. So you're going to have your task name, your planned date, your end date, your actual start date, your actual end date, and so on. The right-hand side is your Gantt chart to help you see how things are overlapping in the construction field and make sure that, if you need to have the finished ground done before you start putting the building in, well, obviously you want to make sure that Gantt chart shows it. And so here are the rest of the columns, because I know that image doesn't show you everything, but basically, if that is an active task, you would have it checkmarked. If it's not active, you would uncheck mark that, and then it won't be included in the simulation. So just kind of keep that in mind. The status bar, or the status column, actually has two bars within it. The planned date is on the top, and the bottom bar is the actual dates, so that you can see how much separation is between those. And there's a little sample over here on the right-hand side of what that would look like. And then, of course, your task name, your planned and actual dates. Now, the task type, we're actually going to learn how to modify that task type or add additional task types, because this really determines how the objects appear when they appear in the simulation. So, and how they disappear. So, like if you're demolishing an item, you're going to get rid of that existing ground. You're going to replace it with, your proposed ground. You don't want your existing ground to show up through the entire process, because it might end up hiding some of the construction. Maybe you have to grade out that existing ground, do a lot of cut there. If you don't remove that existing ground during the simulation, then the building is going to be buried, and everyone will be like, are you on crack? So just, those are kind of some of the things that we'll talk about, but we're going to definitely take a look at those task types and how to modify those. And then we're going to actually look at attaching pieces of your model to that task list so that you can see how it all works together. So when it comes to importing data, and like I said, I am going to show you this in a bit, but basically this Data Sources tab is where you'll attach those external databases, whether it's Microsoft Project or Primavera, or maybe it's something completely different. You can take that information into a CSV file and use any other project software that you have by just importing that CSV file from it. And that's what we're going to use today. We're going to actually be using the CSV files. The configuration tab is where I was mentioning, those task types. You've got your construction task type, a demolished task type, and your temporary task type. And those are default. They come with the software automatically. But you can remove them. You can add new ones. This is very, very flexible. So if you need to add in some temporary or some additional temporary things, maybe you're putting in a lot of pipes, burying them, so you put in some temporary oh my gosh, I can't think of the name, the boxes basically to keep the walls from collapsing in on your workers. So you might have those models created and added to this so that people can see, especially the municipalities or whoever you're working with to have this project approved. Your construction inspector is going to want to know that, yes, you have all the right safety equipment, so you might have some of that temporary equipment in there. Or maybe it's even, road signs or, road closures or, where you're going to temporarily send people around you know, around the site to get them, you know, safely to and from wherever they need to go without disturbing the construction site. Then the Simulate tab is actually where you're going to play the simulation. So you'll notice that it started on the left and we move to the right within the timeliner. We start with tasks, we go to the data sources, we configure it, and then we actually simulate it. So there's two simulation bars. The simulation toolbar here will allow you, in fact, let me just go ahead and mark this. So this simulation bar, whoops, that's not working. There we go. All right, so this simulation bar here is going to allow you to play the simulation. You'll rewind it, fast forward it, go all the way to the end, whichever. But you can actually grab this simulation bar as well and slide it back and forth along the timeline. And the timeline actually shows up, it can actually show up as days, it can show up as weeks because it might be a really long project. You don't want to go day by day. You might want to just see 1 week at a time. You can actually change what you see in this timeline bar, but it will show you as you go along the Gantt chart below. And right here, you know, I only have 2 tasks, so it's only showing me the 2 tasks, and this one is already, you know, passed, but it would show you the 2 bars and how they line up in that Gantt chart. And then, of course, our task pane. As it's going through the simulation, it will show you how far along you are, whether it be the site grading or, you know, maybe it's your existing ground stuff and then your finished ground stuff, or you might even have more lines here specifically for the building. And so each one of those tasks would show up in the task pane to show you about how far along they are in the project. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about the general steps. There are some very general steps. First thing you need to do is prepare the models. So the appendix of this student guide actually talks a lot about preparing the model. Whether it's in Revit or Civil 3D, we have both set up in there. And specifically, when it comes to setting up the model for a Revit model to come in and show that construction simulation, you know, in Revit, a wall is all one object. And so we actually show you how and walk you through the steps to split that wall out so that, you know, maybe you get your studs up first and then you put your sheetrock on and then you go back and you put your bricks on the outside exterior of it. You know, you can have each of those individual layers actually show up when they really would show up in the construction field. Since you are breaking up the models, and by the way, you know, corridor models for civil models is the same idea. You know, in Civil 3D, a corridor model is all one model, or it could be a couple of corridor models that, you know, you have in the same model, but basically, you know, rather than going in and putting in your sub-base and then your base material and then your curb and gutter and sidewalks and very last your asphalt or the concrete wearing course, you know, you'd have to actually separate that out. And so like I said, the appendix actually shows you how to prep that model as well. Then you need to take that information and create some save sets from it and search sets. And so Chapter 4 actually teaches you how to do that. I'll show you 1 or 2 today just so that you can see how important it is. But, you know, you need to be able to actually be able to tell it, you know, I want all my windows in during this week of construction. And so I would save a full set of all your windows to simulate that coming in during that week. Next thing you want to do is add tasks to the Gantt chart. And so you'd go in and you can either manually do it, or like I said, we can do it very automated if you have that project management software. And then you'll configure how the simulation is done or how the objects will look during the simulation and link the simulation objects to previously created animations. So I mentioned that we actually teach you how to animate the crane so that you can animate how that crane lifts the HVAC unit on top of the roof of the building. And in Chapter 8 of the student guide, we actually do that. And so what you'll find is as you go through this workflow, you're going to learn just the right amount of information at just the right time for what you're working on. And everything is playing off of the other. So even though Chapter 4 is learning how to save sets and search sets, I'm still going to be using it in Chapter 9. So you'll repeat that process again in Chapter 9. So it's all playing off of each other. And like I said, Chapter 8 is working with the animations and animating objects, and that's when you work with the crane. And then finally, you're going to actually play the simulation, figure out, where there might be issues, and go back to your team and say, hey, you know what, we're not getting the road done fast enough to be able to, put in this or that on the building, and we really need that done before we can put it on the building, because otherwise, maybe it's a really sandy soil or something like that, and maybe the crane is going to fall through the existing ground surface, so you need to make sure that that road is done and in place before you can actually do that. And so you go and make those changes. You communicate with the team. It's all about communication. That's what Navisworks is here for, is to facilitate that communication on the project. So like I said here, I was talking a little bit about preparing the models. The appendix really talks a lot about this, but you would take and, pull out the plywood and the brick and have each of those objects or those types of pieces of your wall, the parts of the wall are going to be all separated out so that you can bring in each one individually at the perfect time during the construction phase. The same thing with your road. All right. The great thing about the save sets, the reason that save sets are so vitally important is because if you have your project management software with all of your tasks already populated, and then you go in the Navisworks software and you create all of your save sets, there are some task matching rules that you can apply to your task list that will automatically connect the right objects to the right tasks. And so whenever you can work smarter, the better, right? And so that's what you're going to do, is make sure that those save sets and everything are created so that when it's time to connect them to your timeline, boom, it just happens automatically. And so I'm going to show you that today. If something doesn't connect automatically, then you can go in and manually connect it. And so I'm going to show you how to manually connect tasks with objects, because let's face it, sometimes that happens. Maybe the save set wasn't named exactly the same thing as the task list item. And so when that happens, it's not going to necessarily recognize each other, and so you'll have to manually go in and do that. And so I'll show you how to do that. When you are configuring how things display as they simulate, this is basically what you would do, is you'd come in and configure that setup. So you have the option to set the color of the item. You have the option to set how much transparency it shows up. Maybe during the demolition, you have it show up at 25% transparency. When it's completely gone, maybe you have it show up at a 95% transparency. That way you can see where the existing items were in conjunction with the finished product, but it's not going to completely overwhelm the image, and it makes it a nice way to show previous and future all in the same image. So I think the simulation toolbar is pretty self-explanatory. I won't go through that too much, but we'll actually use it when I show you how to do this. So let me go in and actually show you how to use the software to start your construction simulation. Okay, so here I am in the software. And one thing you'll notice is I do have my existing ground showing up as well as my proposed ground. I do have my corridor in here, but right now that corridor is all one piece. And so what I want to do is actually go in and append that model that I have created that has broken up my corridor model into multiple pieces. And so, and I need to do the same thing for the building. So let me actually go in and show you how to do that. So when I'm ready to append additional models, let me just hit escape here. I go back to the Home tab and click Append. And let me find it in my system. There we go. So here's the corridor solids. I've called it corridor solids so that I know that it's been broken up into solid objects. I'm just going to open that. And I don't know if you noticed this, but all of a sudden this gray area came in with the green. Basically what's happening here is my corridor model is at the exact same elevation as my finished ground surface. And so just to make it a little bit easier to visually see that corridor, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go in and modify the elevation of it just slightly. Now, this isn't something you have to do. You could have gone in and had your finished ground have like a hole where that corridor goes. You know, you'll always have options, but for our purposes, I'm going to go make that modification. So over here in my selection tree, I'm going to right-click on that corridor solids model, and I'm going to do a units and transformation. And here, I'm just going to bring it up ever so slightly, less than a foot, in fact, less than half a foot there, and there we go. So now you can see that corridor a little bit better. Now, let me zoom out a little bit or pan this. You can see when I pick on each of these items, these are a little bit more realistic sections of the road on how they would actually come in. So, you know, if they are working on the sidewalk, they might lay this much of the sidewalk on one day of construction and then come in and lay that much of the sidewalk on the next day of construction. And then, you know, as far as the asphalt goes, they might pave just half of it one day and the other half another day in that section. So, like I said, the appendix actually teaches you how to break that up, and you can break that up in specific section ranges and in each specific type of object or each sub-assembly from Civil 3D. So you have those options. Now, let me go ahead and append my building that's been broken up as well. Okay, there we go. So I've got my building that has all the parts separated. I've got my road that has all the parts separated, and it's looking pretty good. The next thing I want to do is go in and save those save sets. Now, like I said, I'm not going to save all of my work, my save sets. What I'm going to do once I actually show you a couple, I'm going to open up another file that has all of my save sets already pre-saved so that we can quickly connect those, because otherwise we'd be here quite a while. So let's go in and look at maybe our first floor. So here in the selection tree, I'm going to just expand my new model that I brought in, because you'll see that on the first floor, I have different roofs that I might bring in all at once. I can bring in my floors for just the first floor. And in fact, I can bring in my concrete floor separate from my generic 12-inch floor. So this might be, the generic floor might be, you know, the floor joist that you bring in, and then the next time it comes in, you might bring in the plywood. So that might be the joist, that might be the plywood, and you know, with everything in the model right now, you're not actually seeing it, but it would actually show it to you, it would highlight it. Whereas the concrete, you know, you might need to get in there and pour that concrete first, and then start. Excuse me one second. Okay, sorry about that. You can lay the concrete, then you can come back and do the other floors that are on that first floor. And so if I wanted to just lay that concrete right now, I can come in and do a save set, and in the save set, I would tell it exactly what it is. okay? Because what it's going to happen is when I use those rules to automatically connect my, my tasks from the timeline to the objects in the model, it's going to look right here in the save sets for that, okay? The next thing you might want is to actually pick like your windows, or maybe we need to go to the second floor and look at the casework. Maybe you want to set up having your cabinets come in first, and then your fillers come in second. So I might come in and select all of my cabinets and save those as a save set. And obviously what I would do is, as I'm saving those sets, is I would make sure that they match the task names in the Primavera software or project management software, whatever it is, okay? So let me go ahead and open up the next file so that we don't have to go through all of this. And I've forgotten which one I need. Okay. So let me show you basically the steps that I skipped here by opening up this other file. Is I have all of these save sets already created for me. So here are my roofs that'll go in at one time. Here's another couple roofs that'll go in at another time. My metal deck on the second floor would be going in at once. Maybe my foundation walls, I'd pour those at one time. So all of that is already set up. I've got my interior walls and everything set up so that it will automatically connect. Now, let's actually talk about, connecting everything. So the next step is to make sure that we have our existing ground and our finished ground coming in at different times. So in my task list, I'm going to show you how to manually create a task in here. To do that, I'm simply going to, by the way, I have Timeliner open. If this is not open, on the Home tab, Tools panel is where you would turn that on. And I like to keep it pinned open so that it doesn't disappear. If you unpin it like I just did, you'll notice that Timeliner is down here. And then I just come back over here and I click the pin to make sure it doesn't auto-hide on me again. So the tasks, very first step, you start with the tasks. I'm going to add a task, and I'm going to name it something. So this would be my row, this would be my existing ground demo, right? Because I'm going to demo my existing ground. And then I would go in and set the dates for that, making sure that, my planned dates are set according to my actual dates. So maybe I had this planned for June 10th of this year, and my planned end date would have been maybe on August 10th of this year. But my actual start date, maybe we didn't get started on time, so we started on July 1st. Well, that's okay. It's okay if it happens. And then, of course, what's our actual end date? Well, now that it didn't start until July 1st, maybe we're going to push it and try to get done by August 31st instead. Now, the next thing I need to do is set that task type. And so this is where I would come in and decide, well, is this a construction? Is it demolish? Is it temporary? What kind of type is this? So I'm going to choose demolish here. But the Configure tab is where I would actually go in and set that up. You can see I can add a new type of task and then give it a name. Let's see, this would be road closure maybe. Okay, and maybe at the start of the appearance, it doesn't actually show up because we're not going to close the road until we absolutely need to. And so we'll do a hide on the start appearance. but on the end appearance, do we need that as well? Well, no, it might be maybe a little bit gray, or I might come in and, you know, set the red transparency or something like that on the end appearance. And then when it's actually appearing in the model, you know, early appearance or late appearance. This is if it's coming in early before its start date, you know, the planned date or the actual date, and then at the end of, or start at the simulation start, does it appear or not appear? So you would set each of those up, and I can actually go in and change the appearance definitions as well. So here I can decide, you know, maybe I need a blue color to represent something. And so I can come in and add this blue color. There it goes. I've just got to be patient. Maybe I've got that color there, and you know, what do I want that to actually do? So this was my signage. Okay. Oops. And you know, what's it going to actually do? Is it going to you know, be transparent? Is it going to be blue? What is it going to be? When I click OK, I actually have that available now instead of the hide. So it's that easy to come in and configure how things are going to look. But let's go back to our tasks. Now that we understand how to make that task type, we can go ahead and do our next task. So our next task is actually going to be you know, grading the finished ground. And so I'll add another task here. And by the way, if I type in a task name and then I hit the Enter key, it will automatically go ahead and add a new task for you. So that's a quick way to, you know, add those tasks quickly. Let's see, this is finished ground grading. And my actual, or my planned start date was going to be August 1st. And it was supposed to be done by October 15th. And then my actual start date, we're going to get a little bit of a late start. It won't be until, whoops, that didn't take, did it? Let's take it into September. And we'll start on the 10th of September. And we'll end hopefully in August, or sorry, October. Okay, there we go. And this one is going to be a constructed cast type because we're actually going to be creating it. Now, all I've done is add empty tasks. It's not connected to anything. So if I come over here at this point and I hit simulate and I hit play and I'm like, why am I not seeing anything? Well, that's fine. You haven't connected it to anything in the model yet. So before you can simulate it, you have to stay on that task pane, and you need to find it in your model. So here I want to have the task selected. So I've got my existing ground, or my existing task selected. And then over here in the selection tree, I want to select that existing ground as well. So I've got both of them selected. Then I'm going to attach them to each other, and I'm going to attach the current selection. Okay? And I'll do the same thing for my finished ground. So I'm going to select my finished ground in the task pane. I'll select my finished ground in my model, or in the selection tree. I like to use the selection tree because it's just really easy for me to find exactly what I want. And then I'll click Attach again and attach it to the current. So those are my two tasks just for the grading, just for the civil folks, right? So I'm going to come back over here and simulate it. And when I hit play, you'll see things start to work. There it's starting to come in, starting to get graded. Now my finished ground, oh, it's staying blue because I had it selected in the model. So let me deselect that here. So all I'm doing is hitting escape to deselect that. There we go. So that looks a little bit better. Now, you'll notice when I simulated that, though, it didn't quite do it exactly the way I wanted to, because I wanted to actually continue to see that existing ground in this red color. You can see it kind of showing up. so that it would override what's going on there. And so I can actually go back in and make those changes. It's not a problem. I can change how everything is connected, and so or how everything displays, even though I've already attached it to my task. So I come back over here to configure. With my construct, I can tell it, well, I really want, on the start appearance, I want that to be, 90% transparent, but let's make it purple this time. And for the end appearance, I'm going to have it actually appear in the model so that it's as if it's just real. And my early appearance, maybe I'll have that be a green color. And for late, we'll make that purple as well. And then on the end of, well, let's see, no, the start of simulation, since I don't want it to show up at the beginning, I definitely want to set that to hide because that's the construction. It's not going to exist until it shows up in the real world, so on the date that it's planned. And then on the demolish one, I'm going to go ahead and have it at the start actually appear in the model so you'll see it, and maybe hide it on the end. But then if it's early, let's make it green. No, let's make that actually a different color green. Let's go with 90% transparency. And for the late appearance, let's go with red. That could be a problem if it's late. And then at the very start of it, it would be showing up, right? Because we're going to demolish that. So now I've reset those, and you can see the difference when I go in and simulate this, how different that actually looks as it goes through the construction phase. So you can see they kind of come and mesh together, and then when it's all said and done, it comes in solid. All right, so enough on that. The next thing we want to do is actually go in and see how to connect our automatically connect tasks and the why am I having brain farts? We'll actually connect to the project management software and then connect that project management software automatically to objects in our model. So the way that we do that, and I don't know why that deflated, here we go. We're going to come over to the data sources, and we need to connect the databases. So we've got two databases. We've got one database that's specifically for our corridor and another database that's specifically for our building, because those came from two different project managers, right? We've got our architectural project manager, we've got our civil project manager, and now they're going to come together and play together nicely in this BIM model. So on the Data Sources tab, I'll click Add, and I'm going to add a CSV file. And I do want my civil timeline file to start with. Okay. In the field selector, hopefully your software will have column headings. If it doesn't, you can go ahead and uncheck mark that. But if it does, then you want to go ahead and use those column headings to automatically fill in this field. If this does not automatically fill in, then you may need to come in and manually add items. And you just select, what it's doing is it's looking at that file that you've now connected, and it's saying, well, here's the column heading, which one of these matches? Luckily, mine all match perfectly. Well, not luckily, I kind of did that on purpose, right? Because you want to work smarter, not harder. All right, so I'm going to click OK to that. And what it did is it went ahead and added the database. But all it did was add the database. So let me just hurry and rename this, because both of them, I want to be able to tell which one is which. So I'm going to right-click on it and rename it. And this is going to be for my roads, right? And now I need to actually tell it to create that task hierarchy. So over here, in fact, let me just show you. Here, I still only have two tasks. So on the Data Sources tab, whoops, it didn't take the name. How come? Okay, now it took. All right, so now that I have that name, I can right-click, and I'm going to say, hey, go ahead and rebuild that task hierarchy. And what it's going to do, it looks like some of my values might have been missing, and that's okay. It's just in my project management software. I didn't have my actual start dates with dates in them, in those cells. That's okay. I'm just going to click OK to that. And so now that I have rebuilt that task hierarchy, my tasks are actually showing up over here. That's great. Unfortunately, it doesn't have anything attached to it. So let me just show you here. Here's my existing ground. It does have an attachment. You watched me attach it. My finished ground has an attachment, but none of my road tasks have a piece of the model attached to it. Like I said, if you play your cards right and you you think ahead and you name things, maybe your save sets and search sets, according to what they are in the project management software, you can use rules that automatically connect them. So I'm going to do that. I'm going to automatically connect them. So I'm going to come over here and use the auto attach. For civil files, I typically just use that bottom one. So I'm going to use the bottom one, click apply to the rules, and boom, it went ahead and connected all of my road information down here. Do you see that? Now, we're getting short on time, so I'm just going to quickly go through and add the building, and then I'll let it run through the animation. So I'm going to click add my CSV file. Here's my architectural file. Everything is connected. Beautiful. Now, I'm just going to rename it. Okay, and of course I need to tell it to build that task hierarchy. Again, some of the date cells were empty. That's okay. And now I'm going to come back to my tasks, and it looks actually pretty good. You can see that since, well, actually, so here we go. Here's my building stuff that just came in. Not everything has an attachment, so again, I want to go run my rules. And this time for buildings, you want the first two selected. I'll apply those rules. And when that's done, everything should now be connected. If it's not, you can go in and manually connect it, whatever is missing. But it looks pretty good, and you can see it's found sets. Oops, there we go. So here's my roof reference, my roof 1 and 2, but it's found those save sets automatically because I went and took the time to create them. Now when I simulate this, you can see this might have been one without any dates assigned. Remember I brought those cells in and it warned me about that. I'd go in and add those dates, but I'm just going to go ahead and hit play. And while that plays, we can go ahead and open it up to questions.
Okay, great. Thanks, Michelle. Let me have a look here and see. I know that we had some come in earlier. And maybe can you just clarify as well? Someone wanted to, they asked if you were covering Intro to Navisworks 2018, and I clarified that you were covering, this was Intro to Navisworks 2018 in a BIM workflow, and which book you were referencing.
Right.
So you have been referencing the 2018 book, but that is still a work in progress. Is that correct?
That one should be available by the 31st.
Of July?
Yes.
Perfect. Okay, great. So we do have a question that came in kind of near the beginning here at 12:15, where John asks, can I have views that show both the final condition for the project as well as the timeliner view showing the model at a specific point in time?
Yep. So basically, if you want it at a specific point in time, you can move this slider around, and you can see how it goes back and runs back and forth through the construction, so that you can go in and create those snapshots. You can save those screenshots if you'd like. Absolutely.
Okay, great. Another question that just came in a few minutes ago, can you use search sets as well as explicit sets?
Yes, and in fact, let me make my timeliner bigger here. That's exactly what my building did when I brought in my building model and had it automatically connect using the rules. It used my sets, whether it be a search set or a saved set, it doesn't matter. It will look in those sets to try to find things that match.
Okay, excellent. I don't think I see any other questions here. Again, if you have questions for Michelle, you can pop them in the Q&A window within WebEx. Do you ever corruption models or crashes in Navisworks Manage 2018? I'm not sure.
I have not seen crashing. Then again, you know, I've got a model that I make sure is a reasonable size to be able to work on student machines. You know, that might be something to ask a firm that is using much bigger models than what I'm using.
Right, yes. Do you ever have corruption? Sorry, he was just corrected with that question. Okay. Yep. Makes sense, yeah. Okay, I don't see any other questions here at the time, Michelle.
Okay. Now, there are a few things that I didn't get a chance because of time to actually show you, but you know, basically in Chapter 9, we actually go through and show you a little bit about time-based clashes as well, so that you can see, you know, as the construction happens, if you're going to have clashes with pieces of construction equipment, or if you're going to have problems with, you know, two pieces of equipment being in the same place at the same time, so that you can actually, you know, avoid those problems during the construction phase. So we actually show you how to do that as well.
Michelle, yeah. I know you're just ending it here. There was another question that just came in. I thought maybe now would be a good time since we were answering them.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Is there any way of automatically splitting a Revit file on, oops, my question disappeared. Hold on a second. It literally, I think another question came in. Here we go. Is there any way of automatically splitting a Revit file on saving? That was the question. And he says splitting in quotations.
Okay, so I'm guessing that the question that he's asking is, or that they're asking is, you know, when you're in Revit, is there a way to automatically split that model out so that you have each of those parts as different components for the construction phase? I'm hoping that's the question. There are tools in Revit that allow you to do that, but it's a little bit of a process, and so that's why we've added that to the appendix of this student guide, so that you understand how to do that inside of Revit, because the student guide is really focused on how to do things in Navisworks, but we didn't want to leave out that preparation stuff, right? I mean, that's just as important as bringing your model into Navisworks. And so, yes, we do cover that in the appendix so that you can learn how to split that model out, because it's not completely automated. There is a little bit of a process, and so that's why we added it. Great question.
Perfect. Okay, great. So I think I can go on here to the next slide. And this works well. People have been asking, you know, when will the book be available? How can we purchase the book? So here we just want to let you know, again, Michelle had said that this should be ready by the end of July, the book, the 2018 version of the book. The 2017 version, of course, is already out. And these are the different products, formats, and ways you can purchase. So as Michelle mentioned, we call them student guides. That's basically your printed book. So it arrives either spiral bound, all ready to go, or if you purchase it from Amazon, it has the perfect binding, where the binding is glued together. So you do have those options of where you want to purchase it from. If you do purchase on Amazon, just so you know, the book size is slightly smaller. That's just the way they do that. If you prefer an ebook and have it, you know, a digital version of the book that you can have on your laptop or on one of your tablet or device, then we have that as well. We also have e-learning bundles. So if you're looking to learn, you know, how to use the software from start to finish, and you really want to have an intro course and go all the way through advanced, we have bundles for that. We'll bundle, you know, 3 to 5 of our books together for one price, and that's a more, you know, economical way of learning the software. If you are an instructor and teaching the course, we have instructor tools. So those have the answers to the books that are within the guide and timing suggestions. Some of the instructor tools also come with a set of PDFs. I'm not sure, Michelle, if you know, do these ones come with that or not for the Navisworks?
For Navisworks, yes. We do have the slides that would come in PDF if you're teaching it.
Oh, perfect. Okay, so those are fantastic, because then if you're an instructor, you know, very little prep work for getting that together for your class. So we have those as well. And if you need to print off, you know, need multiple copies For a large organization or a training center, then we have digital site licenses where we give you the files and give you the access to print. You know, we pre-arrange, you know, obviously with sales, how many copies you can print, and then you self-print yourself. And there's no waiting for any shipping or anything like that. And here's our websites here. So ASCENTeStore.com is the ASCENT eStore, and if you go onto Amazon.com and you search for ASCENT Center for Technical Knowledge or type in the name of the book you're looking for, that should come up on there. We have an author page, and then from there you can see all the titles we have on Amazon. If you're more familiar with our website, ASCENTED.com, ASCENTED.com, it's the last one there. I mentioned it beside our blog. We have a blog, but you can also go to the website directly, and that will link you over to our eStore. So you just have to go up to Training Materials and click on Courseware, find the Navisworks software, and then from there, that page right now, if you were to go to that page, you would see Navisworks 2017, 2016, and earlier versions. And as soon as that book is ready and available, I will have it up on the website under, obviously, the 2018 title, and you can click through there. And from our website, you can also access table of contents and sample chapters, so you can have a look at the book before you purchase.